Man, I just actually bit the bullet and watched the 2005 adaptation of Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice, and I a few hours ago, and I was left with thoughts that I'm not sure that this has really been hashed out by a lot of people, fully to really explain the perspective, but I did watch one negative review of the 2005 adaptation about, and they were talking about the way that it felt it rushed. I I feel that there wasn't a lot of dialogue really between Elizabeth and Mr. Darcy. These characters really didn't. I I think one of the rules that they tell you in writing school is show don't tell for one thing, and how that would apply to romance is just not this, because what we got, you know, was an unconvincing in a big way, and it was not terribly convincing, the romance, because although we do see subtle things like things that happen, like the scene where he grabs her dress and everything on the way out and everything. I mean, if you're observing, you can't help but notice these things and everything, and observant type. But the whole problem with this adaptation, I think that I have come to, and I can't slight Austin's book because I haven't read it. I've only watched the adaptation of it because it was obviously visually appealing. Like, but I can't help but feel that they had 2 hours to show us a convincing love story, and it just didn't. Like, everything about it felt rushed through, and like there was a lot of detail that just was not present in the storyline, and you have characters that are reacting to it all over the place, all suddenly, without really any sort of it feels like a lot of the plot in this movie took place off screen, you know and in particular, especially around Elizabeth and Mr. Darcy, like their relationship, when Mr. Darcy confronts her in the rain and everything, and he's talking to her and he confesses his love for her, my initial thought going into that scene was, this sentiment was, reaction to it was basically, you barely know this person, like, and that's how it felt. It felt like you barely know Elizabeth. I mean, I'm not saying she's not your acquaintance or anything, and you haven't made her acquaintance, but that's what it felt like. It felt like like it felt as though the relationship between them ended up rushed through and everything in such a way that we don't actually see Mr. Darcy actually falling in love with Elizabeth. We don't see how this transformation took place. We just see the after effects of it. It's this 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 show, this movie, like it told us how Mr. Darcy felt. It didn't show us, it didn't show us the process of how he came to feel this way about her or anything. It just had a few witty banter back and forth between the two of them, but not really anything that would have, caused a man to fall in love with a girl, and like seriously, like the whole fucking, romantic plot here is just basically not there and missing. And then when he basically confesses to her, it's like my basic thought is, you barely know Elizabeth. Like, how could you love a woman that you've shared maybe like two conversations with in this whole fucking movie? it just it came off that way, in such a way that I just wasn't feeling it or convinced about the romance at all. And it sucks because like, I was told it was a great movie, and I went in, and I've seen millions and millions and millions of girls swoon over this whole thing, and yet I'm watching the same thing, and, it takes me a few hours to really crystallize it, in my head and realize, "Hey, wait, I didn't like this experience. Here's why." You know, like I said, I mean, I just I had a hard time believing that Mr. Darcy was actually in love with Elizabeth watching it because, the way that they went about telling this particular story really didn't see them interact much at all before he was suddenly confronting her. It felt very rushed through in such a way that it just wasn't terribly convincing at all. So, that's my general take on the movie. I mean, other people have said more or less not the same thing, but that's the point of view that I've come to after having watched it. I mean, I've heard that the other adaptations are more faithful to the Jane Austen novels and everything, and I'm just kind of like sitting here, like I think I would rather just read the fucking book than go for it this way. Ugh.